Welcome everyone to the fourth in our series of conversations with Sammies finalists this summer. I'm Samantha Donaldson, Vice President of Communications at the Partnership for Public Service and your host for today's conversation. So excited to be with you all today. As in any workplace, women leaders in government play a special and important role in their organizations. And they also face a set of unique challenges. Today, we're going to meet two women who have shown extraordinary skill and character in leading people and solving big problems. So let's welcome our panelists for today. First, we have Yolanda Lopez. Yolanda is the acting director of Voice of America and was recognized as a Sammies finalist for her work to restore VOA's independence, credibility, and employee morale after a period of political interference and challenges. I will also add the Voice of America was just recently recognized as the most improved mid-sized agency in the partnership's Best Places to Work in the federal government to work rankings, in large part to Yolanda and her team's work around employee morale. And we also have Barbara Martin. Barbara is the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer at the VA. Barbara has been a champion in revolutionizing how veterans interact with the VA, and is a Sammies finalist for her help in helping the agency ensure better and more streamlined services for those who depend on it. Welcome to you both. Congratulations again on being Sammies finalists. So Barbara, I'm going to start with you. The VA is the second largest agency in the government, and not to be overlooked by VOA's great work, is also was recognized as the most improved large agency in our most recent Best Places to Work rankings, as well as the fifth large agency. So share a little bit about how you're able to create such widespread change at a large agency, as well as overcome challenges and such as organizational resistance and implementation.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be in your company and the company of Yolanda as well. So I think from my experience at VA, I think there's an element of activating our entire teams, and our entire team, meaning 400,000 strong, imagination of sort of the art of possible, and really kind of connecting people with tangible tools in terms of how to implement these great experiences with veterans and their families. So I think there's an aspirational component of it where you really want to kind of capture the imagination of why are public servants here in the first place. I think we're all grounded in that dedication to service, number one. And then sort of the tactical component of, okay, what are the concrete tools, trainings, sort of leadership practices, other types of artifacts that we can arm our employees with to actually practice what will produce a great experience. So I think there's an aspirational element and also a very tactical element as well.
All of our Sammies finalists is that they believe in the art of the possible and working in large agencies and having to overcome different challenges. I think they have that as their North Star. So Yolanda, you similarly had to face large challenges in a complex organization when you entered into leadership at the Voice of America during a really abrupt transition. So can you talk a little bit about how you've managed empathetically lead during these unprecedented times while being compassionate to yourself and to those you lead?
I think that in my case, it was any transition is difficult. That is, and it presents its own challenges, right? And in my case, because I came from VOA, I came from the language services, from the divisions. I had been in the agency for many years. I think that facilitated me, taking over the agency as an acting director. And also I knew my team, I knew the potential of everyone in VOA. And that made all the difference because we were able then to make changes quickly. I didn't have to go
Thank you, Yolanda. Barbara, I'm going to go to you, and hopefully we're having a little audio challenges, so hopefully Barbara's audio will be clear.
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So, we were talking about cultural shifts, and I know Yolanda was talking about that in her remarks too. And you've implemented a number of cultural shifts across the VA and government. I love this, from cookbooks to toolkits, which is tremendous. I love that. It shows the wide swath of what you've been able to accomplish. So share with our audience a little bit about what's been your proudest achievement.
So I think for me, I'm just one person, right? And I think it goes back to sort of what I alluded to in the beginning, which is, how do we collectively activate what is possible for folks to sort of institutionalize and implement at an individual level. So it's an individual level to kind of scale at the collective. And I think for me, there are a couple of things that I feel most proud of VA and kind of our collective team is really being able to operationalize and sort of make it understandable for folks how to practice the values that we all live by here in VA and customer experience principles. And we've done that, as you alluded to, by creating training and different toolkits and things of that nature. But I think our employees, they're so special. Public servants are so special, and certainly VA employees as well, because they are serving a cause greater than themselves by serving those who have served that cause. And it's just totally inspiring to kind of see this movement grow and sort of evolve and adapt over time. And certainly it takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight. But I think as an organization, we have sort of been able to create that space in how we think and how we institutionalize and sort of deliver services. We made space for experience in addition to the kind of operational metrics that we always keep track of and certainly want to report out on. But there's room in sort of our lexicon, our thinking, our decision making now for experience as this co-equal measure of our own performance. So we actually are putting ourselves in the shoes of the veteran and thinking from their perspective, not just from an organizational perspective. And I think the way this bears out is really the measurement of our North Star, which is what veterans tell us, which is trust in VA. And over time, we sort of back in this journey back in 2015, 2016, we wanted to ask veterans at that time, do you trust the department to fulfill this country's commitment to veterans? And it's a very simple question, a very important question to ask. And the responses of veterans who took that survey, about 55% said that they either agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. At that moment in time, that was not a number to aspire to, certainly, but we knew we had only one place to go, which is up. So fast forward to today, same question asked, and you now have 78% of veterans who either agree or strongly agree with that statement, which is an increase of 23%. So to me, it's so inspiring to see that we collectively and individually can together move the needle on that most important North Star of trust. I think that's a really critical measure of our performance and our success.
That's great. And I know Yolanda's going to come back log in and hopefully her audio problems will be resolved. So I'm going to stay with you and ask another question. You all have done tremendous work at the VA around customer experience. I'd love to talk a little bit more about customer experience broadly across the federal government, and this is it's been part of the president's management agenda. This administration's really put equity and trust at the center of their work around customer experience. So can you talk a little bit more broadly about why excellent customer service is so important for our entire government to focus on, and specifically some of the functions, where good customer experience, what outcomes that can lead to across our government?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I think back in 2015, 2016, when we VA sort of initiated this journey of again, focusing on customer experience as a core measure of our performance. And sort of back then, I think conceptually people agreed with it, but we as an agency didn't really know how to kind of operationalize it and make it part of our thinking and day-to-day business. And so I think about, we had a catalyst, we had a crisis back in 2014, which really jump-started our efforts here. And to see the movement across government, and of course, as you mentioned, the executive order, president's management agenda, it is now becoming something that is, people are realizing is not sort of a fad or a flavor of the month, but it's actually bringing us back, to me, to basics, which is, why are we here as public servants? Why are we here as government? And that is to serve the people first, not the bureaucracy first, but the people first. And I think there's a hunger in folks who join public service to kind of meet that aspirational mission. And I feel that myself. And so I think the fact that we collectively in government are focused on the human dimension of how we support the members of the public is really, really resonating. And frankly, I see it as an incredible recruiting tool for the next generation of public servants, because ultimately we all want to contribute to a cause greater than ourselves when we choose public service. And to be able to step outside of sort of thinking of government work as merely transactional and bringing, again, that human side, that human dimension, adapting the way we serve and the way we deliver services to meet the needs of members of the public who are like ourselves, I think is really, really an amazing moment in time that we all share together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barbara. And Yolanda, I'm so glad you have your audio back. And we're going to repeat your great answer to the first question so everyone can hear it. And it connects nicely to what Barbara was just talking about, because I did hear you mention, you had earned the trust of the people that worked at the Voice of America going into this role. And then, talk a little bit, next to you earn that trust with the people that you serve through Voice of America. So let me repeat that question and then have, you restate your answer. So just to reset, you entered a leadership role at a Voice transition point. And I'd love to hear, how you managed to lead during those unprecedented times while being compassionate to yourself and to the others that you lead.
What I was saying before is that any transition is very challenging, right? Any transition requires a lot of moving parts and talking and communicating more than in any other situation. But the good thing is that I had been in Voice of America for a few years, and the team that surrounded me had been also in Voice of America for many years. So we knew right away where to start, and also we didn't have to go through the learning curve that most of people have to go through, especially when you are becoming the director for the first time. Although I am still acting director, but I was in this position for the first time. So to lead a federal agency in these circumstances is kind of challenging. But again, because I knew Voice of America, I think that was something I got going for me. The first thing we did is obviously try to be as transparent as we could and open a lot of channels of communication with our employees and to regain their trust. And we opened multiple platforms and ways in which they could communicate. And I always say it's not just about us talking, but it's about listening. And that is a very important part of what we do. And obviously, we had to regain the trust of our audience. If we are okay with our employees and our colleagues, like I like to say, and we are all on the same page, and we are providing a great product. In this case, is news and information that are objective and comprehensive. We gain back the trust of our audience, which is very important as a journalist. That's the first thing that you want to have, is the trust of your audience. And for that, to achieve that, we have to have also the trust of our colleagues as well.
When you transitioned to this role as acting director for Voice of America, there was a series of challenges. You talked about low employee morale, but there was reporter evacuations, there was COVID-19, amongst others. Can you share with our audience what your greatest challenge was when you took this on and how you overcame it?
Yeah, well, thank you. It was very challenging. Obviously, the pandemic, it was challenging for everyone, right? And then to come new to this position that, in my case, I didn't expect. And after a period of, turmoil in the agency, And then you have to right away from day one start facing a lot of challenges. I will say that all of them were very challenging for me. But the one that affected me probably the most, and still was evacuation of our journalists in Afghanistan. That was a very crucial moment to us because then you realize that people around the world, especially journalists, not just from Voice of America, but journalists around the world, and in this particular case, journalists from Voice of America were targeted because they were journalists for Voice of America. And that really hit home. A lot of people, I don't want to go into the details for security and confidentiality issues, obviously, but it was, we had to evacuate some of them, and not just them, but also their families. And also you have to deal with this kind of crisis that we have relived again now with Ukraine and Russia, that not only we have people in those countries, but we have people in our colleagues in Washington that are from those countries, that they are reporting in the news happening in Russia and Ukraine, in Afghanistan, in Burma, you name it. And they have families and friends there. So that is very challenging, and to me was very mind-blowing. And I always knew that all journalists in general are very brave, especially the ones that work in conflict areas. But journalists in VOA are truly heroes. Because not just what the ones that they are, obviously that they are in the conflict zones in those regions, but also the ones that are here and they are committed to tell those stories with objectivity. And to be able to do that when the story hits home, it is very, very challenging. And still, to me, that continues to be the biggest challenge. I haven't overcome that challenge, right? But it has made me make a lot of changes, and we have increased and strengthening our security protocol for our journalists around the world. Is becoming increasingly dangerous for them to do their jobs. So that has the only silver lining is that now everybody's more aware of the work that they do and that they need and deserve the resources and our support to make sure that they can continue provide this kind of work safely, right? So that is, I would say, that is always something that I wake up every morning like, I have to keep everybody safe. It's the only way we can continue telling those stories, right?
And I appreciate you highlighting, one, the criticality of the role of these Voice of America reporters located across the globe and what they're doing in very difficult and often harrowing circumstances, but also that from the challenge that you overcame, you learned lessons from it and then put immediate action in place, so that hopefully it would be less of a big obstacle moving forward. So I appreciate that learning there. Talking about the criticality of the reporters, working at Voice of America, would love to hear what's been your favorite story or stories, it's probably hard to choose just one, that Voice of America has reported on.
I'm always very proud to say that in any conflict, the news cycle is crazy. It's really crazy in commercial television, commercial radio, in digital. In the digital world, is even crazier. But Voice of America sticks with the story. So to me, always my favorite stories are the ones of 1 year after. Right? Like right now, we are preparing a comprehensive coverage of 1 year after the fall of Afghanistan. Or we went to Parkland after 1 year of the shootings. We went to Paradise after 1 year of, Paradise was devastated by wildfires in California. So I always like the stories that talk about the resilience of people. Those are my favorites. And also because it shows the commitment that Voice of America has with the audience. And that we are going to continue telling that story. We believe that the stories are long, the stories take time, and the story doesn't end just because the news cycle ends, right? We are committed. We measure our impact. Voice of America measures impacts not with ratings, but with this kind of commitment because we are there for the long run. And that's what the audience appreciate from us. And that is why governments block our content in some areas, because they know that we have the trust of the audience. Otherwise, they wouldn't care. But that is why we are blocked in Russia. We have problems now in Turkey, and the affiliates that we used to have in Afghanistan, they are not allowed to carry our content anymore. But we are still committed to tell the stories in several ways, using circumvention tools, other tools to go around that censorship. And just because we are committed and we are there for the long run, and that is our commitment to our audience.
Unmute myself. Two and a half years in. Thank you. Thank you, Yolanda. So moving back to Barbara and switching a little bit more from your day-to-day, but talking more as a female leader working in government. Representation really matters, and role models are vital to our professional development experience. I'm sure we all have great mentors that have inspired and encouraged and challenged us along our careers. So Barbara, I'd love to hear, and Yolanda, I'd love to hear this from you too, after Barbara has a chance to answer, is, who is your favorite female public servant? And who speaks to you as your own, personal superhero, sheroes, we should say. Love to get, a little bit more there.
Yeah, well, I think instead of landing on just one, if I may, I think I would like to sort of name a bunch of them, and it's my sisters in VA. Honestly, I mean, I have so many incredible colleagues and peers at the Department of Veterans Affairs who I have relied on as mentors for different areas, different reasons, at different moments in my career. And I feel like we have such a strong cadre of true believers, again, going back to mission and sort of the greater good, that I have leaned on, and hopefully I can have folks lean on me as well. It's sort of a two-way street. So I'm sort of inspired by, those siblings of mine who have continued to choose public service, choose VA as their home, their professional home. And frankly, for those of my mentors who, have more experience than me, who are maybe older than me, I admire those that have really paved the way for somebody of my generation to really not necessarily feel some of the barriers that they might have felt back in, maybe the 70s or early 80s. So I would say that it's really kind of a sisterhood, if you will, of mentors of mine throughout the department that have really helped me navigate when I'm, trying to balance, work life or different projects and things of that nature, who I really, really rely on, and vice versa. So it's an incredibly strong network, and feel fortunate to be part of it, and also be able to give back to that next generation coming up behind us as well.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. And Yolanda, how about you? Who are your favorite female public servants? Who has inspired you along your public service career?
Unlike strong female leaders. And since I started in Voice of America, that has been the case. And I have been very grateful because I have learned from them. Now, I will do a shout out of to all the immigrants, to all the that are servants, federal employees, and they have chosen public service. To everyone that looks different, to everyone that has an accent like me, that we are still 100% committed to serving in the federal government. So I would like to do a shout out to all of them, and all of them inspire me because I'm surrounded by so many of them in Voice of America and in USAGM, really, because my sister networks also. So I'm just very grateful that I can learn from all of them.
That you've learned a lot from other female leaders at Voice of America, U.S. Agency for Global Media. Love to hear you share some advice that you would impart on, younger female leaders who are just starting off in government, who just entered government space. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I think that when you say federal government, those are very big words, and it can be a little bit intimidating right? And again, especially for immigrants. But my advice is just dare to be different, dare to be you. I certainly don't fit the profile in sometimes. I thought that, right? Or maybe that was in my mind. That's what I thought, that I didn't fit the profile, or that you don't check all the boxes. But you know, you do, because you are very unique. I'm pretty sure that any of you can add value in any way, in any department in the government, because I'm sure that the government needs you, particularly because you are different, or because you bring um, something that is unique. And that will be what I will say. I know that later we are going to talk probably about the imposter syndrome, but I would say just get rid of that and think about what all the doubts or your weaknesses that you think that you have. Probably those are your biggest strengths.
Barbara, any advice that you would like to add to the great insight Yolanda just shared?
Yeah, and I'll, if I can share a quick story that illustrates, the sage kind of, mantra that I kind of have heard and that I repeat to myself, which is follow your compass. So back in law school, the typical path when you're in law school during the summertime is to do internships with law firms. And way back in the day when I was in law school, I remember talking to my career counselor, and she said, have you applied for all these different law firms for summer jobs? And I looked at her, I said, no, I really want to go into public service. I don't really want to practice in a traditional way at a law firm. And her jaw dropped, and, kind of was based on her experience. She said, you've got to work at a law firm for at least 5 years and then do public service, then do what you want to do. And I knew for me that just was not the path that I wanted to carve. And so even though it was a little bit outside the norm, and it was sort of against sage advice, I followed my compass, and I was very, very anchored and committed to giving back to the public in public service. So that always anchors me whenever I feel a tug one way or another. I mean, really just grounding and following your compass. And I will tell you that for all of us, I'm sure in our careers, that's not always an easy choice to make, because there's certain expectations, there are certain drivers, there's certain pressures, but that's something I've always come back to, and it's never led me astray.
That's a great story. Oh, go ahead, Yolanda, please add.
Right, because even when you work in journalism, it's like, why don't you work in the private sector? You certainly are going to pay much more money. But the thing is that to work to provide a public service and to work with a purpose, with a mission, and with a vision, that is something else. That is something that really fulfills you and really fits the soul in so many ways. And that is really a choice, and I'm glad also as well, like Barbara. It just takes a lot of it's another way of doing things, another way of how you want to manage your career, what your day-to-day. And again, when you have a purpose, and that is what you have in public service, then it is very worth it and very different. It's a totally different mindset.
No, thank you both for those comments. I loved, finding your compass, feeding your soul. There's no greater place in our government to make the impact that both of you are having in your colleagues across government. Yet, we're seeing really a dearth of young people being inspired to go into government. And Barbara, I loved the story that you shared, really pushing back on the traditional path of a lawyer. And, for both of you, and maybe start with Barbara, I'd love to hear what more, leaders across government can do to inspire and open up opportunities for young people, particularly, young women, to come into government and really experience that as a career and make that impact. So Barbara, I'll start with you, and Yolanda, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to, I think, what we were sort of talking about a little bit earlier, which is, changing the narrative about what public service is and what it can be, right? And I think a lot of times there's a narrative out there of sort of a stale, static, one-dimensional, transactional career path in government, that it's cumbersome and bureaucratic and slow. And it's interesting because there are certain elements that are like that for very good reasons. It's part of our checks and balances, our constitutional structure. There are very good reasons for that. And those checks and balances and structures have to be in place. But it doesn't mean that it excludes a vibrant ecosystem of innovation and imagination and creativity. And of course, my bias is around experience and human-centered design as a core practice in government. And so I think it first starts with really kind of reshaping the narrative about what government service is and what it can be, number one. And number two, again, activating that imagination by focusing on the person and the people at the center of why we even exist. We don't exist to serve a bureaucracy, we exist to serve people. And I think a practice and a different way of thinking through design and human-centered design is a great recruitment tool, because people want to feel that aspiration and that mission of giving back. But the perception of how government is sort of, there's a disconnect there. And I think that experience and design thinking is a great way to help us reframe what the narrative is about what government is and can be.
Great remarks, and of course with Sammies, that's what we are aiming to do, is really change and shift those perceptions. You know, with individuals like yourselves and the others recognize. Yolanda, I'd love to hear about what else you would add to Barbara's remarks there.
Well, I think, like she said, we have to focus on the impact. In the Voice of America, we have a challenge. That is that we cannot broadcast or produce content for an American audience. That means that Americans at large, usually they don't know what we do. Sometimes they don't know that we exist, or they think that we are, still from the Second World War. World War II, talking to the Nazis, and that it's just, that era is gone. We started there, but that era is gone. We have evolved, and so when I travel around the world, and I say that I am from Voice of America, not me, but reporters and anchors and other journalists from Voice of America, they are treated as rock stars. They are celebrities because they have such a huge impact in their region, and that is something that probably the United States, Americans do not know. So we do not talk about that impact, because the Voice of America, we are a news organization. We have a firewall that ensures that we are independent, and we provide comprehensive, objective news and information around the world. The impact that we have is pretty significant.
Yolanda, I think we might have dropped your audio again. So why don't we try to get that fixed? And I'm going to move over to Barbara, and hopefully we can get Yolanda fixed quickly here. So Barbara, Yolanda mentioned in one of her previous answers, imposter syndrome, which is extremely common obstacle that women face. So I'd love to hear some tips that you have on overcoming imposter syndrome in the workplace and also as leaders.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I know it's a thing, I know it's real, and I think it would be important to sort of make friends with that feeling, but not let the feeling overtake you and sort of let it run away, with kind of the way you operate. So I think it's always acknowledged to it's always important to acknowledge, hey, I feel in a certain way, an imposter in this space or this role. And I think it's natural to always kind of have a double check on yourself. And that's not a bad thing, in the sense of we all can continue to learn something new from many different places where we sit and many different people. But I think the trick is to not let it run away, out front of you, and really just get grounded and centered in the confidence that you're sitting in a particular seat. You have earned the opportunity in any role that you have been able to achieve, and that you're here for a particular reason to make this incredible impact that Yolanda was talking about. So I think, again, important to acknowledge the feeling, but really kind of be able to set it aside so you can sort of think and do in the most impactful way possible, having that confidence, and again, finding that center, finding that compass of yours to really know that you are in the place that you are meant to be and you've earned it and you have a lot to offer and to give to the organization and your team as well.
Thank you, Yolanda. We cut out right as you were talking about the rock stars of Voice of America journalists as they go overseas.
Sorry.
And I want to make sure we give you time to finish those amazing comments and then also add to Barbara's. So if you want to go back and talk a little bit about, you know, how Voice of America journalists are perceived overseas. I think you were talking about how you all are not as well known here in the States.
Exactly, because by law we cannot cater an American audience. We cater to an international audience, and like you said, we are perceived very well. And again, our anchors or journalists, our reporters are like rock stars. You know, in places like in Latin America, in Afghanistan, in Africa, and Asia. So this is because we focus on, so if we were able to focus more on the impact that we have and how those the affiliates that we have around the world, how they perceive our content and choose our content, you know, above others, and how our journalists are real players in the media landscape around the world, and how we are perceived as objective, as comprehensive, and always, telling the truth, whether about America or about the region. And then, you know, that impact that we have, that it has some of our reporting, like I was saying before, has even forced some law making in some of those countries, and that is a real impact that we have, and that is where we should be focusing more. And if people knew a little bit more about that, and hopefully young people will know more about that, and I'm very grateful that I'm giving this platform for that. I will say, and that is a great path for anyone that really wants to work in a place that has a clear mission and that has a clear, very effective impact around the world.
Thank you. You know, your comments now brought up a good point about having your voice be heard, and how, particularly as a woman in a workplace, how can you have your voice be heard? You know, in large organizations that you both work in either in the smaller rooms and around the conference tables. So Yolanda, I'd love to start with you, and then, you know, Barbara, if you have anything to add, it just, you know, what advice do you have for women about how they can make their voices be heard and influence their work and their career paths?
Well, I think that when you know what you are doing is right, and you are committed to what you are doing, and you trust that that is the right thing to do, that is the driving force, at least for me. And even when sometimes the situations, you know, because I'm introverted, or I'm shy, or I'm aware of my accent, or things like that, those are challenges, and those are fears and challenges that you have to overcome. I'm not saying that, oh, be just brave and don't listen to your inner self telling you this and that. You have to listen to that, but overcoming those challenges, and because the need to do the right thing is bigger than the fear to fail, I think. And that is the advice that I will give anyone. If you know in your heart that your proposal is better, that you have something to add to the conversation, that you can make a difference, believe in that. Obviously, you are going to have those challenges and your voices in your head telling you millions of reasons why no. But if that hunger that you have is bigger, if you are sure that what you are doing is the right thing to do, then you are going to be persistent and resilient. That is what it has worked for me, just because I'm very persistent. Because when I think that something is right, it's just that is what drives me, right? But again, it's not easy. I'm not telling you, oh, I wake up every day and every day I know exactly what I'm going to do when I'm going to do it right. That doesn't work like that. It's just it's everyday struggle with yourself, and also surround yourself with people that allow you to be the way you are, and that allow you to process your decision-making process, and that support you. And even when you are in your low, that team have your back. And I'm very fortunate that I have that kind of team. So that will, I would say, one, trust yourself and be confident in what you are saying, because you know that what you are saying is right. And surround yourself with people that allow you to be that way.
Barbara, anything to add on that wonderful sage advice?
No, it's such great advice, and I'm taking notes. So I appreciate that so much. I think, very much ditto to all, and I would sort of echo in a slightly different way of saying something very similar, is really kind of applying the ability to be tactfully relentless. I've found that to be something that's important, because, sometimes people like to take the stick and sort of take that sort of approach. And there may be circumstances where that is, appropriate and needed. But what I've found, again, being 16 years in VA, is really practicing listening and empathizing with a different point of view to figure out how we might find that Venn diagram overlap in the center. We might be sort of far apart, but I really, truly believe there's nothing we can't solve together. And even if it's a small slice of that Venn diagram, I think if we listen with empathy and are sort of tactfully relentless with, the non-negotiables in any certain situation, to me, that's really been helpful, I think, as we've kind of tried to navigate standing up, particularly the customer experience capability in VA, which is new. It's a cultural shift, a mindset shift. And it's a million efforts by thousands of people over many, many years. So it's not a once and done. It's sort of reputationally and relationship wise, building that type of, I think, cadre of meeting of the minds, and certainly credibility as well, that you're a reasonable thinker. And these are the points of view that you need to negotiate with your siblings to sort of achieve the ultimate impact, which for us, of course, is better experiences for veterans and their families.
Well, this has been such a wonderful and enriching conversation. I think both of your answers are the perfect place to end this conversation. I just love the themes of resilience and persistence, teamwork, leadership, and particularly knowing your North Star, your true compass, at your work and the mission that you're achieving. I think that exemplifies both of you and the achievements that you've had, as well as your colleagues are all across government. So Barbara, Yolanda, thank you so much for your incredible work. And again, congratulations on being recognized as Sammies finalists. We're so thrilled to be able to celebrate your accomplishments. And thank you again for being here today. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in for today's conversation. I hope you had enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a conversation with some emerging leaders in government. So stay tuned for more information on that event. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about Yolanda and Barbara and all of our 2021 Sammies finalists accomplishments, visit servicetoamericamedals.org. For now, thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.